You're sitting in your living room right now, comfortable, safe, scrolling through YouTube like nothing could ever go wrong. But let me ask you something. What's your plan for the first 60 minutes? Not the first week, not after you've gathered supplies. I'm talking about the first hour, when everything breaks, when the emergency broadcast cuts off mid-sentence, when your neighbor's car alarm won't stop, when you look outside and see every single vehicle on your street trying to leave at the exact same time. That moment, that specific moment when you realize the social contract just evaporated. What do? Because here's what I can tell you with absolute certainty. 99% of people already know their answer. They've been programmed by every disaster movie, every news broadcast, every instinct in their panicked lizard brain. They're going to run. They're going to evacuate. They're going to join the largest, slowest moving traffic jam in human history, burning their last tank of gas to reach some imaginary safety that doesn't exist. They'll be dead in a week. Maybe 2 if they're lucky. Not from radiation, not from disease, not from starvation. From predictability. See, the real secret of survival isn't hidden in some prepper forum or military manual. It's hiding in plain sight, written in the architecture of human behavior. When crisis hits, humans become beautifully, fatally predictable. They stampede, they follow, they run toward what feels safe and fight over what looks valuable. And that predictability creates something extraordinary. It creates vacuums, strategic holes in the urban landscape, operational voids, fortress-grade infrastructure that gets abandoned the second the evacuation order drops. Not because these locations aren't valuable, but because 99% of the population is too panicked to recognize value when it doesn't come in a labeled can or a loaded magazine. Today, I'm going to show you 5 locations in your city that transform from ordinary buildings into survival strongholds the instant everyone else runs. We're not talking about bunkers, not military installations, not some fantasy prepper compound in the mountains. These places have something in common. They were accidentally engineered to survive exactly the scenario everyone's running from. And when the stampede starts, they'll be empty. This is the vacuum protocol. Strategic positioning for the collapse scenario nobody's teaching you. Forget Mad Max. Forget The Walking Dead. Forget every Hollywood fantasy that told you survival means running to the woods with a backpack. The real apocalypse rewards the coldest analyst, the person who thinks in logistics while everyone else thinks in panic. Their exodus is your opportunity. Their fear is your strategic advantage. So here's your choice, right now, before anything happens. You can keep scrolling and hope you'll figure it out when the time comes, or you can spend the next 20 minutes learning how to own the emptiness. Let's get tactical.
Rule 0. Understand the stampede psychology. Before we map the safe zones, you need to understand why they become safe zones in the first place. Human behavior in crisis isn't random, it's pattern-based, evolutionary. When threat activates, the brain doesn't think, it reacts. And that reaction follows predictable paths carved by millions of years of survival programming. The patterns. Run from danger toward perceived safety. Doesn't matter if that safety is real, the perception is enough. That's why highways clog. Everyone's running toward away from here without any actual plan for toward what? Secure, obvious resources. Food, water, weapons, medicine. The grocery store gets looted in hours. The pharmacy gets ransacked. Sporting goods stores, gun shops, anywhere that looks like it contains survival supplies becomes a battleground. Follow the herd. When humans are uncertain, they copy the people around them. If everyone's evacuating, it must be the right move. This is how you get 1,000-car traffic jams with 0 movement for 16 hours straight. Seek familiar safety. People flee to family, to childhood homes, to vacation cabins they visited once. Emotional destinations, not strategic ones. Here's what they don't do. Think structurally, assess defensive positions, calculate resource sustainability, evaluate long-term operational viability. That's your edge. While they're operating on instinct, you're operating on analysis. While they're fighting over the last case of bottled water at Costco, you're walking into an abandoned brewery with industrial water filtration and tons of grain. The vacuum protocol isn't about being smarter than other people. It's about being calmer, because calm beats panic every single time. Now let's talk about your 5 target locations. Memorize these. Map them in your city right now, because when the moment comes, you won't have time to Google defensible urban structures near me.
Safe Zone Alpha, the vertical labyrinth. Location, multi-story climate-controlled self-storage facilities. Let me paint you a picture. It's hour 2 of the collapse. The highways are parking lots, the grocery stores are war zones, and you're standing in front of a 5-story self-storage facility that looks completely, utterly worthless to every desperate person running past it. They see a building full of someone else's junk, old furniture, holiday decorations, boxes of memories nobody needs. You see something else entirely. You see a concrete fortress with hundreds of individual defensible positions, limited access points, and a stealth profile that makes you invisible to looters. The defensive architecture is almost beautiful in its simplicity. Picture this. Each floor has maybe 50 to 100 storage units. Each unit has a reinforced steel door with an individual lock. The hallways are narrow, creating natural choke points. There are usually 2 stairwells, maybe an elevator shaft. That's it. That's your entire attack surface. Now run the numbers. To reach you on the top floor, an attacker has to breach the main entrance, navigate to the correct stairwell, climb multiple flights of stairs in a confined space, navigate hallways where you have every advantage, and then breach whatever door you've chosen to defend. That's not a raid, that's a siege. And sieges require resources, coordination, and time. 3 things desperate people don't have. But the real genius is the compartmentalized fallback strategy. You don't defend one position, you defend layers. Lock the main entrance, barricade the stairwell access on your floor. Choose a unit, reinforce it. If that position gets compromised, you fall back to the next unit, and the next, and the next. An attacker has to breach dozens of steel doors to reach you. Each breach costs time, energy, noise. Every barrier you put between yourself and a threat is a barrier they probably won't have the resources to overcome. The stealth factor multiplies this advantage. Storage facilities scream empty and worthless to the panicked mind. There's no food here, there's no medicine, there's no weapons, no obvious survival value. Looters are operating on tunnel vision, hunting for immediate resources. They're not breaking into Unit 347 hoping to score someone's tax documents and winter clothes. You're invisible by default. That's strategic gold. Now let's talk about the infrastructure they built for convenience that becomes your tactical advantage. Climate control systems. These buildings maintain temperature and humidity to protect stored items. That means insulation, ventilation. In some facilities, independent HVAC systems for different floors. You can control your environment. Electrical access throughout the building. These places run 24/7 security systems, hallway lighting, electronic locks. When the power grid collapses and the staff evacuates, you're inheriting a building with wiring and electrical infrastructure you can tap into. Bring a generator or solar panels, and you're in business. The concrete structure itself provides thermal mass, noise dampening, and a degree of protection from environmental hazards. It's not a fallout shelter, but it's orders of magnitude better than wood frame construction. Concrete walls don't catch fire easily. They stop small arms fire. They provide shielding from radioactive particles. Top floor advantages. This is where physics becomes your ally. Gravity works for you, against attackers. You can create traps, barriers, anything that exploits the upward climb. You have line of sight down stairwells. You control the high ground in a structure specifically designed to limit vertical access. Security systems, even dead ones, become tactical assets. Cameras tell you where blind spots are. Motion sensor positions tell you where someone thought intrusions would happen. Electronic lock mechanisms can be repurposed or reinforced. The space itself is useful. High ceilings in some facilities, loading dock access on ground floors. Wide corridors for moving furniture become wide corridors for moving supplies. Some facilities have truck rental, which means they have vehicle bays, mechanical areas, office spaces with computers and communication equipment. And here's the kicker that most people never consider. These facilities often have minimal staff. We're talking 2 or 3 employees for a massive building. When they evacuate, nobody's coming back. There's no owner living on site, no corporate security, no reason for anyone to care about the building itself. You're not squatting in someone's defended position, you're occupying an infrastructural ghost that was purpose-built for compartmentalized security and just waiting for someone to recognize its value. Map every multi-story storage facility within a 5-mile radius of your home. Visit them, note the access points, check the construction quality, count the floors, assess the surrounding area for visibility and approach routes. Because when hour zero hits, you want to walk in like you own the place, because you're about to.
Safe Zone Bravo, the Green Fortress. Location, craft breweries and micro-distilleries. Pop quiz. What do desperate looters see when they smash into a brewery during the collapse? If you answered alcohol, congratulations. You think like the 99%. Here's what you should see. A sustainable, high-calorie food production facility with industrial-grade water purification, fermentation capability, and enough grain stores to feed a small group for months. Let me break down why this location is strategic genius disguised as hipster culture. The resource everyone misses: grain. Every craft brewery sits on top of massive quantities of fermentable grains: malted barley, wheat, rye, corn, oats. We're talking hundreds of pounds, sometimes tons, stored in sealed containers designed for long-term freshness. Looters see beer ingredients. You see carbohydrates, calories, food supply. Raw grain is edible. Cook it with water and you have porridge. Grind it and you have flour for bread. Let it ferment and you have beer, which is literally liquid calories with a shelf life. Medieval peasants survived on bread and beer because grain is energy dense and storable. The science is stupid simple. Grain kernels are seeds. Seeds are designed by evolution to store energy for the new plant. That stored energy is starch, which your body converts to glucose. 1 pound of grain is roughly 1,500 calories. You need about 2,000 calories a day to survive. Do the math. 100 pounds of grain is 75 days of survival for one person. And breweries don't stock 100 pounds, they stock thousands. But it gets exponentially better because of what breweries need to make beer: clean water. The water purification infrastructure in a commercial brewery is borderline military grade. We're talking multi-stage filtration systems, carbon filters to remove chlorine and organic compounds, reverse osmosis systems to strip out minerals and contaminants, UV sterilization to kill bacteria and viruses. This is equipment designed to turn municipal water into brewing quality water, which means it's pure enough to drink safely even if the source is questionable. When the treatment plants shut down and tap water becomes a biohazard, you're sitting on a system that can process creek water, rainwater, even mildly contaminated sources into potable water. The hydration equation is non-negotiable. 3 days without water and you're dead. 3 days. Not 3 weeks, not 3 months, 3 days. A functional water filtration system is worth more than a stockpile of food. Now let's talk about the equipment infrastructure. Those massive stainless steel fermentation tanks aren't just for making beer. They're pressure-rated containers that can store clean water, grain, anything you need to protect from contamination or pests. They're also excellent cover. Stainless steel stops bullets better than drywall. In a defensive scenario, you can position behind tanks and have ballistic protection while maintaining mobility. The floors are concrete, designed to handle heavy equipment and water spillage. That means they can handle weight, they're easy to clean, and they're not going to rot or collapse. The walls are often reinforced because fermentation tanks are heavy and brewers need to move equipment. The doors have industrial locks because the equipment inside is expensive. You're looking at a structure that was accidentally engineered for defense and resource sustainability. But here's where the science becomes your multiplier. Fermentation produces ethanol, ethyl alcohol, the same chemical in vodka, whiskey, and medical disinfectant. Let me teach you something they don't cover in high school chemistry. Yeast consumes sugar and produces two things: carbon dioxide and ethanol. The yeast doesn't care if it's making beer or hand sanitizer. It just follows the chemical process. Sugar in, alcohol out. That means you can produce your own antiseptic. Wound care in a collapse scenario is life or death. Infections kill. Ethanol sterilizes. A bottle of high-proof alcohol is a medical supply that doesn't expire and can be continuously produced as long as you have grain, water, and yeast. The yeast itself is still viable. Brewers keep yeast cultures because different strains produce different flavors. Those cultures are alive, self-replicating, and stored in temperature-controlled environments. You just inherited a biological tool that converts starch into survival resources. Here's the physics. Alcohol boils at 173 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils at 212 degrees. Heat your fermented liquid to 180 degrees, capture the vapor, cool it in a tube, the vapor condenses back into liquid, but now it's concentrated ethanol. That's distillation. That's how you make fuel, disinfectant, or trade goods. The equipment infrastructure might already be there if it's a distillery. If not, you can build a basic still from copper tubing and heat sources that already exist in the brewery. Resource sustainability separates 2-month survivors from 2-year survivors. Raiders burn through looted supplies. They eat the canned food, drink the bottled water, then they starve. You're producing new resources, renewable calories, clean water, medical supplies. You're not surviving, you're operating. The building location is usually strategic too. Craft breweries are often in industrial areas or downtown districts with good water access and loading docks. Limited residential labors means less people around to notice you're occupying it. Concrete construction means fire resistance and thermal mass for temperature regulation. Some breweries have loading bays for truck deliveries. That's vehicle access. Storage rooms for grain mean cool, dry spaces you can repurpose. Tap rooms mean social spaces you can convert to living areas. Kitchens for food prep already exist in brew pubs. You're not moving into a factory. You're moving into hybrid infrastructure that covers multiple survival needs simultaneously. And here's the final advantage: knowledge preservation. If you can recruit someone who knows brewing, or if you learn it yourself, you have applicable chemistry knowledge, fermentation, distillation, sanitation. These are skills that translate directly to water treatment, food production, and medicine. When society collapses, the person who can produce clean water and food isn't just surviving, they're building leverage, political power, because everyone else is going to need what you can make. Map the craft breweries in your area. Note which ones have the largest footprints. Check for water sources nearby. Assess the construction type and access points. Visit during normal business and see the layout. Because when everyone's looting the liquor store for bottles, you're walking past them into a facility that produces bottles continuously, sustainably. That's not luck, that's strategic thinking.
Safe Zone Charlie, the Intelligence Tower. Location: University Astronomy, Meteorology, or Atmospheric Science buildings. Let me tell you about the tactical advantage nobody talks about: information. In a collapse scenario, everyone focuses on physical resources: food, water, weapons, shelter. And those are critical. But there's a resource that multiplies the value of everything else: knowing what's happening beyond your immediate position. That's why you want the highest point with the best equipment. Every university with a serious science program has at least one building designed for observation. Astronomy departments need telescopes. Meteorology departments need weather stations. Atmospheric science needs clear lines of sight to the sky and horizon. These buildings are positioned at the highest elevation point on campus, not for aesthetics, for operational necessity. And that necessity becomes your tactical goldmine. The high ground advantage isn't just military theory. It's physics and geometry. Elevation gives you line of sight. The higher you are, the farther you can see. From a 10-story building, your visual horizon extends roughly 12 miles in all directions. That's a 24-mile diameter of observable space. You can see smoke from fires miles away, track movement on major roads, identify approach routes, spot other survivor groups, monitor weather systems before they arrive. Watch the city from a position of total awareness while everyone else is operating blind in street-level chaos. But the observation advantage is just the beginning. These buildings have something most structures don't: independent power systems. Here's why. Scientific instruments need consistent, reliable power for long-term data collection. A telescope array can't shut down every time the local grid hiccups. Weather stations need to run 24/7 for continuous monitoring. That means backup systems, generators, battery banks. In newer facilities, solar panel arrays. When the power grid collapses, most buildings go dark. You're sitting in one of the few structures still generating electricity. The equipment inside these buildings is where the real intelligence capability lives. Radio telescopes don't just look at stars. They receive electromagnetic radiation across massive frequency ranges. That includes radio communications, emergency broadcasts, ham radio traffic. If anyone's transmitting, you can potentially intercept it. Weather radar installations give you atmospheric monitoring. You can track storms, temperature changes, wind patterns. In a chemical or biological scenario, wind direction becomes survival intelligence. Knowing which way contamination is moving means knowing where not to go.
Satellite receiving equipment might still be functional even if the satellite network is degraded. GPS satellites, weather satellites, communication satellites, some of them will keep functioning. If you can receive those signals, you have data access that 99.9% of survivors don't. The buildings often have communication equipment beyond just the research tools: university emergency systems, campus security radios, networking hardware for computer systems. Even if the internet is dead, local area networks can still function. Radio equipment can still transmit and receive. You are not just occupying a building, you're occupying a communications hub. Let's talk about the structural advantages. University science buildings are built to code and then some. They house expensive equipment and students. That means robust construction, fire suppression systems, emergency power, multiple exit routes for safety, and security systems because that telescope costs more than your car. The building materials are usually concrete and steel. These aren't wood frame structures. They're engineered to support heavy equipment loads and provide vibration dampening for sensitive instruments. That same construction provides thermal insulation, noise dampening, and protection from environmental hazards. Access points are limited by design. You don't want random people wandering into a research facility. There are usually 1 or 2 main entrances, maybe a service entrance, and that's it. The upper floors, where the best observation equipment is located, often have restricted access even during normal operations. Card readers, locked stairwells, limited elevator access. That restricted access becomes your defensive perimeter. The rooftop installations are often fenced or caged because of the expensive equipment. That's defensive infrastructure someone else built that you inherit. Add some basic reinforcement and you have a secured, elevated position that's already designed to keep people out. Inside the building, you find laboratories with precision equipment, environmental control systems, clean rooms in some facilities, backup systems for everything because research can't afford interruptions, refrigeration for samples, gases for experiments, batteries, cables, computers, the kind of technology that becomes priceless when the supply chain dies. The knowledge stored in these buildings has value too. Libraries of data, research papers, technical manuals, maps. If the internet goes down permanently, physical information repositories become critical, and university buildings are full of books, papers, and documentation. The psychological advantage of elevation is real. Humans feel more secure at height. We evolved to seek high ground because predators can't easily reach us there. That instinct translates to modern survival. From your tower, you can see threats approaching. You can plan. You can make decisions based on information instead of panic. And here's something most people never consider. University campuses are often positioned near urban centers, but separated from dense residential areas. They have their own micro-infrastructure: campus power substations, water systems, maintenance facilities. You're not just occupying a building, you're positioned adjacent to a cluster of resources that most people will overlook while they're looting downtown. The social perception works in your favor too. During a collapse, people think about surviving, not learning. Universities seem irrelevant to immediate survival. That's the same invisibility advantage as the storage facility. Nobody's rushing to occupy the astronomy building because it doesn't register as valuable in crisis mode. But you know better. You know that information advantage wins longer-term survival scenarios. You know that power generation is scarce. You know that defensive positioning beats reactive scrambling. Map the university campuses near you. Identify the tallest science buildings. Check for rooftop installations. Note the construction quality and access routes. Visit during the day and observe the security setup. Because when everyone's fighting over the grocery store, you're walking calmly toward the one building that lets you see the entire battlefield. Own the high ground, control the information space. In the wasteland, the person who sees first survives longest.
Safe Zone Delta, the fabrication depot. Location: commercial HVAC and refrigeration repair workshops. Here's a question nobody asks in disaster prep forums. What happens when your survival gear breaks? The solar panel cracks, the water filter clogs, the door you barricaded gets breached and needs reinforcement, the radio dies, your tools wear out. What then? Everyone focuses on acquiring resources. Nobody focuses on maintaining them. And that's why 6 months into a collapse, the people with the biggest stockpiles are starving in broken shelters, while the people with the repair capability
are still operational. You want to be the person who can fix things. That means you want the workshop. Commercial HVAC and refrigeration repair shops are invisible gold mines. While mobs are smashing into sporting goods stores for camping gear, you're walking into an industrial facility that contains everything you need to build, repair, and maintain survival infrastructure for years. Let me show you what I mean. The tool inventory in a commercial HVAC shop is staggering. We're not talking about a homeowner's garage with a drill and a screwdriver. We're talking about professional-grade equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Precision welders, TIG, MIG, arc welding equipment. The ability to join metal is the ability to build structures, repair vehicles, fabricate weapons, create storage containers. Welding is civilization-level technology. It's how you turn scrap into infrastructure. Pipe threaders and benders. This is how you create plumbing, build frames, route water or gas. The ability to manipulate pipe means you can build pressurized systems, irrigation, defensive barriers, anything that requires controlled flow. Sheet metal brakes and shears. You can cut and bend metal sheeting into whatever shape you need. Roofing, armor plating, containers, reflective surfaces for solar cooking. The applications are limited only by your imagination and needs. Refrigerant recovery machines and manifold gauges. These let you safely work with compressed gases. That knowledge translates to pneumatic systems, pressure storage, understanding gas behavior under different conditions. Electrical testing equipment, multimeters, oscilloscopes, circuit tracers. When you're trying to wire solar panels or troubleshoot a generator, this equipment means the difference between success and electrocution. Brazing equipment, soldering stations. This is precision joining work for copper and electrical connections, water filtration systems, electronics repair, fine detail work that crude welding can't handle. The raw materials are almost as valuable as the tools. Copper tubing by the spool. Copper is antimicrobial, ductile, corrosion-resistant, and valuable for water systems, electrical wiring, distillation equipment, and trade. It's soft enough to work by hand, but strong enough for pressure applications. Electrical wire in every gauge, from fine control wiring to heavy-duty power cables. When you're building off-grid systems, wire is the nervous system of your infrastructure. Aluminum and steel stock, raw material you can cut, bend, weld, and shape into whatever you need. Structural components, tools, weapons, trade goods. Refrigerant gases in tanks, R134A, R410A, ammonia in commercial systems. These are compressed gases with various properties. Some can be repurposed for chemical applications. Others are under extreme pressure, useful for pneumatic tools or systems. The knowledge of how to handle them safely is valuable in itself. Compressors. These are electric motors designed to create pressure. You can repurpose them for air tools, inflation, creating positive pressure in a sealed environment for air filtration. The motors themselves can be converted into generators with some mechanical knowledge. HVAC units, even broken ones, are treasure troves. Aluminum radiators, copper coils, electric motors, fans, capacitors, thermostats, control boards. It's like having an electronics and metals recycling center dedicated to your survival needs. Now let's talk about the building itself.
These shops are fortresses by accident. Concrete block walls are poured concrete. They need solid foundations to support heavy equipment. Those walls stop small arms fire and provide excellent thermal mass. Heavy rolling garage doors. These are steel, often insulated, and designed to secure expensive equipment. They're harder to breach than standard doors and can be reinforced relatively easily. Security grading on windows. Tool theft is a major problem for these businesses, so they install serious security hardware. That's defensive infrastructure you inherit. The buildings are usually in light industrial areas with low foot traffic. They're not on main streets, they're not in residential neighborhoods. They're in the zones people drive through but don't walk through. Low visibility, low priority for looters who are hunting for obvious survival resources. The interior layout works in your favor too. Open work bays for vehicle access. These become staging areas for projects or storage. Office spaces for living quarters. Parts rooms with shelving and organization systems. Break rooms with sinks and electrical outlets. Many shops have their own air compressor systems plumbed throughout the building. That's stored energy you can tap into for pneumatic tools or other applications. The knowledge factor might be the biggest advantage. HVAC and refrigeration work requires understanding thermodynamics, fluid dynamics, electrical systems, and mechanical engineering.
The people who work in these shops know how systems work at a fundamental level. If you can recruit one of them, or if you become one of them through study, you have applicable engineering knowledge that translates directly to survival infrastructure. How do you purify water? It's a heat exchange problem. How do you generate electricity? It's a mechanical to electrical conversion problem. How do you create refrigeration without power? It's a thermodynamic cycle problem. The people who understand these principles can adapt solutions from available materials. They don't need a specific product. They understand the physics and can engineer workarounds. That's the difference between surviving until your supplies run out and building systems that produce new supplies. The thermal properties of these buildings are significant too. They're designed to handle extreme temperatures because they store and test HVAC equipment. Insulated walls, ventilated work areas, climate-controlled offices. In summer or winter, you have shelter that maintains livable conditions better than most residential structures. Some shops have vehicle lifts. That's useful if you're maintaining vehicles, but it's also useful for working on large equipment, creating elevated storage, or building elevated defensive positions. The electrical infrastructure is robust because these shops run heavy machinery, high amperage service, multiple circuits, industrial-grade panels. When you're connecting solar panels or running generators, that existing infrastructure is a massive advantage. And here's the strategic element nobody considers. These locations are educational resources. The manufacturers of HVAC and refrigeration equipment provide technical manuals, wiring diagrams, troubleshooting guides, parts catalogs. There's documentation everywhere explaining how complex systems work. That knowledge doesn't disappear when the power goes out. It's printed on paper or stored on computers you can power independently. This is your fabrication center, your repair depot, your engineering workshop, the location you use to maintain everything else in your survival operation. While raiders are using their looted tools until they break and then discarding them, you're repairing tools, building new tools, adapting tools for new purposes. That's not just survival, that's technological continuity. Map the HVAC and refrigeration repair shops in your area. Note which ones are standalone buildings versus spaces in strip malls. Check the construction quality. Look for shops that advertise commercial services, not residential, because they'll have heavier duty equipment. Visit during business hours if possible. Talk to the technicians, ask questions, learn what you can about the work. That knowledge is reconnaissance. Because 6 months after collapse, when everyone else's equipment is failing, yours will still work. And when theirs fails, they'll come to you. With trade goods, with respect, with need. And need is leverage.
Safe Zone Echo, the unbreachable sanctum. Location, title vault rooms in title companies and corporate archive facilities. Let me tell you about the location nobody thinks about until they desperately need it. The panic room, the final fallback, the absolutely positively unbreachable position you retreat to when every other option has failed. Everyone knows about bank vaults. Heavy steel doors, combination locks, reinforced walls, and everyone knows that during a collapse, banks get hit immediately. Raiders want cash, gold, safe deposit boxes. Banks are high-value targets that attract violence. So here's the secret. Not all vaults store money. Document vaults exist throughout your city in buildings nobody's thinking about. Title companies, corporate archives, legal document storage facilities, records management companies. These places have vault rooms built to the same standard as banks, sometimes better, because water or fire damage to legal documents can cost millions in lawsuits and destroy property records. These vaults are engineered to survive catastrophic building failure. Let me explain what that means structurally. Document vault rooms are concrete bunker construction, 6-inch to 12-inch reinforced concrete walls, concrete ceiling, concrete floor. They're literally boxes of reinforced concrete inserted into the building during construction. The doors are fire-rated steel, not just theft-resistant, fire-rated. That means they're designed to maintain integrity during a building fire that reaches over 1,700 degrees Fahrenheit for multiple hours. The doors are often heavier than bank vault doors because fire resistance requires thermal mass and insulation layers. Multi-point locking mechanisms. These aren't simple deadbolts, they're locking bars that extend into the frame on all 4 sides: top, bottom, left, right. When engaged, the door becomes part of the frame structure.
You're not forcing this open without industrial cutting equipment and hours of time. Fire seals and gaskets. These expand when heated to prevent smoke and flame penetration. They also prevent gas intrusion, which means they provide a degree of protection against airborne contaminants. The rooms are designed to survive scenarios that would collapse normal buildings: structural fire, flood, in some cases, building collapse where the vault room remains intact even if the surrounding structure fails. Think about what that means in a collapse scenario. This room is designed to protect paper from fire and water. It's going to protect you from environmental hazards, intruders, and deteriorating conditions orders of magnitude better than any residential shelter. The stealth factor is even more powerful than the other locations. Nobody is breaking into a title company looking for survival resources. There's no food, no weapons, no medicine, no obvious value to the desperate mind. The building itself screams boring office work. Even the people who work there probably don't think about the vault unless they're filing documents. It's invisible infrastructure. When looters are smashing into every retail location, pharmacy, and obvious target, they're walking right past your fortress because it doesn't register as valuable. You're not just hidden, you're conceptually invisible. The interior of these vaults is climate controlled by design. Document preservation requires stable temperature and humidity. That means HVAC systems, often independent units for the vault itself, air handling, filtration. Some facilities have redundant climate control because document damage is catastrophic for their business. That means backup systems, temperature sensors, automated controls. You're looking at a sealed environment with managed air supply. In a chemical, biological, or radiological scenario, that's the difference between exposure and protection. The shelving and storage systems are useful too. These aren't cheap residential shelves. They're industry archive systems designed to maximize space and support weight. You can store supplies efficiently, organize resources, create inventory systems. The archival supplies themselves have value. Acid-free paper lasts decades, pens and markers, filing systems, labels. This sounds mundane, but information management becomes critical in long-term survival. Record keeping, maps, documentation, inventory tracking. When you can't Google information, written records become irreplaceable. The access systems are sophisticated even if they seem simple. Electronic locks with backup mechanical systems. In normal times, they use key cards or codes. When power fails, there are manual override mechanisms. Once you control the building, you control those systems. Some facilities have multiple vault rooms of different sizes. That gives you options. Use smaller vaults for high-value storage. Use larger vaults for general supply storage. The surrounding office infrastructure is useful too. Break rooms with sinks and microwaves, bathrooms with plumbing, office furniture you can repurpose, computers and equipment you can salvage for parts, phone systems that might include radio or satellite backup. The building location is usually strategic without being obvious. These facilities are often near courthouses or in professional office districts, not downtown retail chaos, not dense residential areas. They're in the overlooked professional zones that people drive through but don't think about. Parking is usually available. That means vehicle storage and access without being visible from main streets. The buildings themselves are typically modern construction. They need to meet code requirements for document storage, fire suppression systems, emergency lighting, proper electric. These aren't old, deteriorating structures. Here's the psychological advantage that's harder to quantify. Having an absolutely secure fallback position changes how you operate. When you know you have a space that is genuinely unbreachable, you can take calculated risks elsewhere. You can venture out for resources knowing you have a guaranteed safe return point.
That confidence translates to better decision-making. You're not operating from desperation, you're operating from a position of security. The multi-layered defense strategy becomes obvious when you think about the building layout. The outer offices become your buffer zone. You can set up noise traps, early warning systems, surveillance positions using the office windows. Anyone approaching has to move through multiple rooms to reach the vault area. You can create false trails, make some offices look occupied or looted, guide potential intruders away from the vault location, control the path attackers take through the building. The vault itself is your absolute last line.
If you're forced to retreat inside, you can wait out threats that would overrun any normal defensive position. Days, maybe weeks if you've stocked it properly. No one is breaching that door without heavy equipment and significant time. And if they're making that much noise for that long, you have options. Hidden exit routes through building infrastructure, communication with allies, negotiation from a position that cannot be taken by force. The building's utility infrastructure is already in place. Electrical panels, plumbing, HVAC ducts. In a long-term occupation, you can tap into these systems, route power from solar panels or generators, establish water collection and filtration, use the ductwork for ventilation or communication. Some document storage facilities have loading docks for moving large volumes of records. That's vehicle access, covered loading areas, direct entry that's not visible from the street. The business model works in your favor too. These companies often have minimal on-site staff. Most records are filed and then sit untouched for years. It's not like a retail operation with constant traffic. The building might see a dozen people on a busy day. When collapse happens and staff evacuates, there's no owner living on site, no corporate security staying to defend the property, no reason for anyone to care about the building itself. It's not residential, so neighbors aren't watching it. It's not retail, so looters aren't targeting it. It's a ghost from day one. The legal industry infrastructure provides another advantage. Title companies and law firms have document retention requirements. They can't just throw away old files. That means they have decades of stored records, property maps, county records, historical documents. In a collapse scenario where the internet is gone and government records are inaccessible, having physical copies of property ownership, utility maps, and legal documents has immense value. You can identify who owned what, where underground utilities run, historical land use. That's intelligence for rebuilding or for identifying other resources in your area. The fire suppression systems in these buildings are usually more sophisticated than residential. Sprinkler systems, fire extinguishers at code-required intervals. Some facilities have gas suppression systems in the vault rooms specifically because water would damage documents. That means you're in a structure designed not to burn down. Fire is one of the biggest threats in a collapse scenario when emergency services aren't responding. Being in a fire-resistant building with suppression systems is a massive advantage. The redundancy built into these facilities is impressive when you start looking for it. Redundant power systems for security and climate control, redundant locks, multiple exit routes for life safety code compliance, fire-rated walls between sections. These are boring safety requirements that become survival advantages. And here's the element that ties everything together. These locations exist in every city. Title companies are everywhere because real estate transactions happen everywhere. Corporate archives exist because companies are required to retain records. You're not looking for a rare, specialized facility. You're looking for common infrastructure that's hiding in plain sight. Do the reconnaissance now. Search for document storage, records management, title company, corporate archives in your area. Use Street View to check the buildings. Look for modern construction, limited windows, professional office appearance. Visit during business hours with a legitimate reason. Note the access points. Count the doors. Check the parking situation. Observe the surrounding area for visibility and approach routes. Look for buildings that are standalone or corner units with multiple exits. Map at least 3 potential locations. You want options, redundancy, different areas of the city so you're not locked into one geographic position. Because here's the truth about survival. Having resources is important, having skills is important, but having a position that absolutely cannot be taken by force, that's psychological security that lets you operate effectively while everyone else is paralyzed by fear. The vault isn't where you live full time. It's your safe house, your bank, your armory, the place where your most critical supplies are stored in absolute security, the place you retreat to when external conditions become untenable. It's the ace up your sleeve that no one knows you have. While raiders are fighting over grocery stores and everyone's scrambling for defensible positions in residential areas, you're sitting in a concrete bunker with a steel door that was engineered to survive building fires and floods. They can't breach it. They can't burn you out. They can't starve you out if you stocked it properly. They can't even find it if you've maintained operational security. That's not just survival, that's dominance.
The synergy, connecting the network. Now let's talk about how these 5 locations work together. Because the real power isn't in occupying one safe zone, it's in controlling a network of positions that cover different survival needs. The storage facility gives you defensible living space and compartmentalized security. That's your primary base, your castle. The brewery gives you food production and water purification. That's your resource generation, your supply line.
The science tower gives you information and communication. That's your intelligence, your early warning system. The HVAC shop gives you fabrication and repair capability. That's your workshop, your maintenance depot. The document vault gives you absolute security and fallback position. That's your panic room, your last resort. Chain them together strategically, and you're not just surviving, you're operating a survival logistics network that covers defense, resources, intelligence, production, and security. Think about the geographic positioning. These locations probably aren't all in the same neighborhood. That's an advantage. You're not putting all your resources in one place. You have distributed positions across the urban landscape. You can move between them based on threat conditions. If one position gets compromised, you have fallback options. If one area becomes untenable, you relocate to a different zone. The resource flow between locations creates sustainability. Grain from the brewery gets processed using tools from the HVAC shop. Water gets purified at the brewery and stored at the storage facility. Intelligence from the tower informs when and how you move between positions. Critical supplies get stored in the vault. Tools and equipment stay at the workshop. The living space at the storage facility gets maintained using fabrication capability from the shop. You're not hoarding everything in one place, hoping it lasts. You're creating a supply chain. The human element scales too. These aren't single-person positions. Each location can support small groups. 5 people at the storage facility, 3 at the brewery, 2 at the tower, 2 at the shop, 1 managing the vault. That's 13 people operating a network instead of 13 people competing for one position. Specialization becomes possible. Someone focuses on food production, someone handles intelligence, someone manages fabrication, someone provides security. Division of labor is how you move from survival to rebuilding. The communication between positions is manageable even without modern technology. Radio equipment from the science tower, prearranged meeting times, dead drops at neutral locations, runners if necessary. You don't need the internet, you need coordination. The trade value multiplies too. The brewery produces food and water beyond what your group needs. That's trade goods. The workshop can repair equipment for others. That's trade services. The intelligence from the tower has value to other survivor groups. You're not just surviving, you're establishing economic value in the post-collapse environment. And all of this is built on locations that 99% of people will ignore, overlook, or underestimate. That's the genius of the vacuum protocol.
The dark truth, what they don't tell you. Now for the part of the survival conversation nobody wants to have. Every strategy has a shelf life. Every defense has a weakness. Every advantage eventually gets discovered or countered. The vacuum protocol works because of timing and psychology. It works in the immediate collapse when people are panicked and operating on instinct. It works in the first weeks when looters are hitting obvious targets, and most people are still figuring out what's happening. But long-term survival isn't about the first month. It's about month 6, month 12, year 2. Eventually, the obvious resources get exhausted. The grocery stores are empty. The pharmacies are picked clean. The easy targets are done. That's when desperate people start thinking differently. They start looking for production capability instead of finished goods. They start recognizing infrastructure instead of just supplies. And they'll start finding the same locations you found. Maybe they notice the brewery is operational. Maybe they see movement at the storage facility. Maybe they track radio signals to the tower. When that happens, you have choices to make. Do you defend? Do you trade? Do you recruit? Do you abandon the position? There's no universal answer because every scenario is different. But here's what you need to understand. Other people are not automatically threats, but they're not automatically allies either. They're variables. Some will want to trade. Some will want to join. Some will want to take. You need to be prepared for all 3. The defensible positions we've covered buy you time. Time to assess. Time to prepare. Time to make calculated decisions instead of desperate reactions. But they don't make you invincible. Nothing makes you invincible. The biggest threat in any collapse scenario isn't radiation or disease or starvation. It's other humans. Specifically, organized groups of humans who figure out what you figured out and decide they want what you have. That's the scenario no amount of preparation fully solves. Because if a determined group with numbers and weapons decides to take your position, your options become defend and risk everything, negotiate and hope they're reasonable, abandon and lose your investment. None of those options are good,
They're just different flavors of bad. The calculus changes based on numbers. One person in a storage facility can hide effectively. 10 people in a storage facility create a visible operation. Visible operations attract attention. There's a balance point between having enough people for security and specialization and having so many people that you can't maintain operational security. That balance point is different for every location and every group composition. Here's another dark truth. Resource production creates responsibility. If you're successfully growing food or purifying water or fabricating tools, people will find out. Word spreads. And then you have to decide, do you trade? Do you share? Do you defend exclusively? Each choice has consequences. Trade creates connections, but also dependencies and vulnerabilities. Sharing builds goodwill, but attracts dependence. Defending exclusively makes you a target, but maintains your autonomy. There's no right answer, just trade-offs. The psychological element is darker than most people prepare for. Long-term survival in a collapsed society means making decisions you never thought you'd have to make. Who do you help? Who do you turn away? How do you handle threats? What lines are you willing to cross? These aren't theoretical ethics questions. They're Tuesday afternoon decisions when someone's at your door and you have to choose in real time. The people who survive aren't necessarily the most prepared or the most skilled. They are the people who can make hard decisions under pressure and live with the consequences. That's a different kind of preparation that you can't buy at a camping store. And here's the final dark truth. Even if you do everything right, luck still matters. A random patrol finds your position. A fire spreads from a neighboring building. Someone in your group gets seriously injured. A disease outbreak hits your area. You can minimize risk. You can maximize advantage. But you can't eliminate chaos. The vacuum protocol gives you better odds than 99% of people will have. That's not a guarantee. That's just math. Better odds, better positioning, better resources, better infrastructure. But still, survival, not safety. Because safety doesn't exist anymore.
The choice. Decide now. We're at the end. The question is, what do you do with this information? You can close this tab and go back to scrolling. Hope you'll remember this if something happens. Tell yourself you'll look into it later. Let this become another piece of content you consumed and forgot. Or you can open a new tab right now and start mapping. Search self-storage near me. Find the multi-story facilities. Screenshot the locations. Save the addresses. Search craft brewery near me. Note which ones are standalone buildings. Check their square footage. See which ones are in industrial areas versus downtown tourist zones. Search university near me and find the campus maps. Locate the astronomy, meteorology, or atmospheric science buildings. Look for the structures with rooftop installations. Search HVAC repair or commercial refrigeration. Filter for the shops that advertise commercial service, not residential. Use Street View to check if they're standalone buildings. Search title company, document storage, records management. Look for the boring office buildings in professional districts. Take 30 minutes today and create a map. Pin these locations. Note the distances from your home. Check the routes between them. Identify which ones are closest to your daily patterns. That's not prepping. That's reconnaissance. It's free. It's legal. It's just paying attention to infrastructure that was always there. Then, if you want to go deeper, visit them. Walk into the storage facility and ask about units. Tour a brewery. Visit a university building during public hours. Drive past the HVAC shop and observe the layout. You're not doing anything suspicious. You're just aware, observant, informed. Because here's what I know with absolute certainty. 99% of people won't do this. They'll watch this video, think it's interesting, and never take a single action. They'll wait until the emergency broadcast system activates, until the traffic starts, until the panic is real. And then they'll join the stampede. They'll clog the highways with every other person who waited until the last second. They'll fight over the picked-over scraps at the grocery store. They'll flee to the woods with no plan and no infrastructure and no long-term viability. And they'll die badly. Not because they weren't warned, because they didn't act when action was free. You're different. You're watching this video. You're thinking strategically. You are willing to consider scenarios other people dismiss as paranoia. That makes you one of the 1%.
The question is whether you're a part of the 1% who just thinks about it, or the 0.1% who actually maps it, plans it, and positions themselves to own the vacuum when it opens. Because I promise you this, when the collapse comes, and it will come, whether it's economic, environmental, geopolitical, or something we haven't predicted yet, there will be a moment, a specific moment when the social order breaks and the stampede begins. In that moment, you'll have maybe an hour of decision time before the highways become parking lots and the obvious resources become war zones. 1 hour to act while everyone else is still processing. If you've done the reconnaissance, you'll know exactly where to go. You'll move with purpose while everyone else moves with panic. You'll walk into your chosen position and start securing it while the masses are still stuck in traffic. If you haven't done the reconnaissance, you'll be making desperate decisions based on incomplete information and running out of time. The difference between those two scenarios is the work you do today. Not during the emergency, today. So here's your choice, right now, in this moment. You can be part of the herd that stampedes when crisis hits, running towards some imagined safety that doesn't exist, burning your last resources on a doomed evacuation, dying in the wilderness or on the highway like 99% of unprepared people. Or you can be part of the 1% who understands that mass panic creates strategic vacuums, that the exodus creates opportunities, that certain locations transform from mundane buildings into fortress-grade infrastructure the second everyone else runs. Welcome to the vacuum protocol. When the herd stampedes, own the emptiness. Class dismissed.